You think you're scared of them leaving. But that's not what keeps you up at night. What terrifies you is who you'll be when they're gone. Because without them, you have no idea who you are anymore. Alan Watts once said something that most people miss entirely. He talked about how we confuse love with need, and how we turn other people into our own personal life rafts. And the moment we do that, we stop being whole people. We become half people, desperately clinging to someone else to feel complete. And here's the thing. Most of us don't even realize we're doing it. We think we're in love. We think we're committed. We think we're being good partners. But really, we've outsourced our entire sense of self to another human being. And when that person threatens to leave, or when we sense them pulling away, we don't just feel sad. We feel like we're about to disappear entirely. That's not love. That's survival mode. And if you've ever felt that grip of panic when someone you care about pulls back even slightly, this isn't about them. It's about something much deeper. Something that started long before you met them. Let's talk about what's really happening here. You meet someone. At first, everything feels right. They make you laugh. They get you. They fill in the spaces where you felt empty. And slowly, without even noticing, you start building your entire world around them. Your routines revolve around them. Your happiness depends on their mood. Your sense of worth is tied to whether they text you back quickly or not. You stop doing the things you used to love because you're too busy making sure they're happy. You stop seeing your friends as much. You cancel plans if there's even a chance they might want to see you. And it feels like love. It feels like you're being devoted, like you're being loyal. But what you're actually doing is handing over your identity piece by piece. You're letting them become the center of your universe, and you're shrinking yourself down to orbit around them. And here's where it gets tricky. Because this doesn't happen because you love them too much. It happens because somewhere deep down, you don't feel like you're enough on your own. Maybe you grew up in a home where love felt conditional, where you had to earn it by being good, by being helpful, by not making waves. Maybe you learned early that your value came from making other people happy, that if you weren't useful, you weren't lovable. Or maybe you've been abandoned before, not just romantically. Maybe a parent left. Maybe someone you trusted walked away. And ever since then, you've been carrying this quiet terror that it's going to happen again. That if you're not perfect, if you're not enough, people will leave. So you adapt. You become whatever the other person needs. You read their moods like a survival skill. You twist yourself into shapes that make them comfortable. And you tell yourself this is what love looks like. But it's not love. It's fear. And the worst part is, the more you do this, the more you lose yourself. You stop knowing what you actually want. You stop knowing what you actually feel. Because you've been so focused on managing their emotions that you've completely neglected your own. And then one day, they pull back. Maybe they need space. Maybe they're going through something. Maybe they just want night to themselves. And you fall apart. Not because you'll miss them, but because without them, you don't know who you are. Alan Watts talked about this idea of the ego. And he didn't mean ego in the way most people think. He wasn't talking about arrogance or selfishness. He was talking about the story we tell ourselves about who we are. And for a lot of us, that story is built on shaky ground. It's built on what other people think of us. It's built on whether we're liked, whether we're wanted, whether we're chosen. So when someone threatens to leave, it's not just the relationship that's at stake. It's the entire structure of how we see ourselves. Because if they leave, what does that say about you? That you weren't good enough. That you weren't lovable. That you failed. And that feeling is unbearable. So you do whatever it takes to keep them around. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You ignore red flags. You accept treatment you know you don't deserve. You sacrifice your own needs, your own boundaries, your own peace. All because the alternative, being alone with yourself, feels like annihilation. But here's what's understood. The person you're trying so hard to hold on to isn't actually giving you your identity. You've just convinced yourself they are. Your worth doesn't come from them. It never did. It comes from you. It always has. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that. Or maybe you never believed it in the first place. Let's get specific about what this looks like in real relationships. You're in a relationship where you're always the one checking in. You're always the one making sure things are okay. You're always the one apologizing first, even when you're not sure what you did wrong. You're afraid to bring up your needs because you don't want to seem needy. You're afraid to ask for more because you don't want to push them away. You're afraid to be honest about how you feel because what if they decide you're too much? So you shrink. You stay quiet. You convince yourself that you're being easygoing, that you're being understanding. But really, you're just terrified. You check your phone constantly. You analyze every text. You replay conversations over and over, looking for signs that they're losing interest. You compare yourself to their exes, to their friends, to anyone who seems more interesting than you. And when they don't respond right away, you spiral. You imagine worst-case scenarios. You convince yourself they're done with you. You start drafting texts in your head, trying to figure out the perfect thing to say to pull them back in. And when they finally do respond, you feel this wave of relief. But it only lasts for a moment, because now you're just waiting for the next time they pull away. This is what codependency looks like. And it's exhausting, because you're not living your life. You're living in reaction to theirs. Here's the hard truth. The reason you're so afraid of losing them isn't because they're so special. It's because you've made them responsible for your entire sense of self. And that's not fair to them. But more importantly, it's not fair to you. Because you're a whole person. You were a whole person before you met them. And you'll be a whole person after they're gone. But you've forgotten that. Or maybe you never believed it. And the longer you stay in this pattern, the more you lose touch with who you actually are. You stop knowing what makes you happy. You stop knowing what you're passionate about. You stop knowing what you believe in. Because all of your energy has gone into managing their feelings, predicting their moods, keeping them satisfied. And the saddest part is, this doesn't even make the relationship better. In fact, it makes it worse. Because when you show up as half a person, when you're constantly trying to earn love instead of just being yourself, you're not actually connecting with them. You're performing, and they can feel it. Even if they don't say it, they can feel that you're not really there, that you're just trying to be what they want. And ironically, that's often what pushes them away. Because most people don't want to be someone's entire world. They don't want that responsibility. They don't want to be the reason you're happy or the reason you're devastated. They just want a partner. Someone who's solid on their own. Someone who has their own life, their own interests, their own identity. But you can't be that person if you've given all of that away. So what do? The first step is recognizing what's happening. And if you've made it this far in this video, you're already doing that. You have to be honest with yourself about the fact that this isn't about them. This is about you. It's about the wounds you're carrying. It's about the beliefs you have about your own worth. It's about the patterns you learned a long time ago that aren't serving you anymore. And that's hard to admit, because it's easier to focus on them. It's easier to obsess over whether they love you, whether they're going to leave, whether you're doing enough. But that keeps you stuck. The real work is turning inward. It's asking yourself, who am I when I'm not trying to be what someone else needs? What do I actually want? What do I actually enjoy? What do I believe in? And if you don't have answers to those questions, that's okay. That just means you have work to do. Start small. Start reconnecting with the parts of yourself you've neglected. Pick up that hobby you used to love. Reach out to that friend you've been ignoring. Spend time alone without distracting yourself with your phone or the TV. And notice what comes up. Notice the discomfort. Notice the urge to reach out to them, to check in, to make sure everything's okay. That urge is the fear. That's the part of you that's convinced you need them to survive. But you don't. You survive before them, and you'll survive after them. And the more you prove that to yourself, the less power that fear has over you. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. Because the moment you start reclaiming your identity, something shifts. You stop being so desperate. You stop being so reactive. You stop twisting yourself into knots trying to keep someone happy. And that changes the entire dynamic of the relationship. Because suddenly, you're not showing up as someone who needs them. You're showing up as someone who chooses them. And there's a huge difference. When you need someone, you're coming from a place of lack. You're scared. You're insecure. You're constantly trying to prove your worth. But when you choose someone, You're coming from a place of wholeness. You're not asking them to complete you. You're inviting them to share your life. And that's the kind of relationship that actually works. That's the kind of relationship where both people can breathe. But you can't get there if you're still trying to use them to fill the empty spaces inside you. You have to fill those spaces yourself first. Let's talk about what this looks like practically. You start setting boundaries, not to punish them, not to test them, but because you actually respect yourself enough to have limits. You stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to manage their reactions. You let them have their feelings without making it your job to fix them. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. You stop analyzing their every word. You stop living in constant fear of the moment they decide to leave. Because here's the truth. If they're going to leave, they're going to leave. And no amount of people-pleasing, no amount of self-sacrifice, no amount of shrinking yourself down is going to change that. But also, if they do leave, it doesn't mean you're not enough. It just means they weren't the right person for you. And that's okay. Because your worth isn't determined by whether someone chooses to stay. Your worth is inherent. It's not something you earn. It's not something you prove. It's just there. And the more you believe that, the less you'll need someone else to validate it for you. Alan Watts used to talk about how we cling to things because we're afraid of impermanence. We're afraid that if we lose something, we'll never get it back. So we hold on tighter and tighter, trying to control the uncontrollable. But the tighter we hold on, the more we suffer. Because nothing lasts forever. Not relationships, not people, not even ourselves. And when we accept that, when we stop trying to freeze everything in place, we actually get to enjoy what's here right now. We stop living in fear of the future. We stop obsessing over the past. We just get to be present. And that's where real connection happens. Not when you're clinging to someone out of fear, but when you're present with them out of choice. When you're not afraid of losing them because you know that even if they leave, you'll be okay. Because you've done the work. You've reconnected with yourself. You've built a life that doesn't revolve around one person. And that's freedom. I know this isn't easy. I know it's scary to let go of the idea that someone else is responsible for your happiness. Because if they're not, then that means you are. And that's a lot of responsibility. But it's also empowering. Because it means you're not at the mercy of someone else's choices. You're not waiting for them to decide if you're worthy. You're not handing over your power. You get to decide who you are. You get to decide what your life looks like. You get to decide what you will and won't accept. And when you do that, relationships stop being about survival. They start being about connection. You stop asking, what can I do to make them stay? And start asking, is this relationship actually good for me? You stop tolerating bad behavior because you're afraid of being alone. You start recognizing that being alone is actually better than being with someone who makes you feel small. And that shift changes everything. So let's go back to the original question. Are you afraid of losing them? Or are you afraid of losing yourself? Because if it's the second one, the solution isn't to hold on tighter. It's to let go. Not necessarily of them, but of the idea that you need them to be whole. You don't. You're already whole. You've just forgotten. And the work is remembering. It's peeling back all the layers of conditioning, all the old wounds, all the stories you've been telling yourself about why you're not enough. Because you are enough. You always have been. And the moment you truly believe that, everything changes. You stop being afraid of losing people. Because you know that even if they leave, you won't lose yourself. You'll still be here. Still whole. Still worthy. And that's the most powerful place you can come from. Relationships aren't supposed to complete you. They're supposed to complement you. They're supposed to add to your life, not define it. But that only works if you have a life to begin with. If you have an identity that exists outside of them. And building that takes time. It takes work. It takes honesty. You have to be willing to sit with the uncomfortable feelings, the loneliness, the fear, the uncertainty. You have to be willing to stop distracting yourself and actually face what's underneath all of this. And when you do, you'll realize that the thing you've been running from your whole life, being alone with yourself, isn't actually that scary. It's actually kind of peaceful. Because you're not this terrible, unlovable person you've been convinced you are. You're just a person. A whole, complex, imperfect person who deserves love and respect and care. And you don't need someone else to give that to you. You can give it to yourself. So here's what I want you to do. Stop for a second. Put down your phone. Take a breath. And ask yourself, who am I when I'm not trying to be what someone else needs? What do I actually want? What do I actually care about? And if you don't know, that's your starting point. Because the relationship with yourself is the most important one you'll ever have. And if that one isn't solid, nothing else will be. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't love someone else fully if you don't love yourself first. And I'm not talking about some surface-level self-care routine. I'm talking about deep, real, honest self-acceptance. The kind where you stop trying to fix yourself. Where you stop trying to be perfect. Where you just let yourself be. That's where freedom is. And here's the beautiful part. When you do this work, when you reclaim your identity, when you stop using other people as a crutch, your relationships get better. Because you're no longer desperate. You're no longer needy. You're no longer afraid. You're just you. Solid. Grounded. Whole. And that's magnetic. People are drawn to that. Not because you're trying to impress them, but because you're comfortable in your own skin. You're not performing. You're not pretending. You're just being. And that's the most attractive thing in the world. But even if the relationship doesn't work out, even if they do leave, you'll be okay. Because you've built a foundation that doesn't depend on them. You've reconnected with who you are. You've remembered your worth. You've stopped outsourcing your happiness. And that's something no one can take away from you. That's yours. Alan Watts used to say that life is like music. It's not about getting to the end. It's about enjoying the dance. And the same is true for relationships. It's not about holding on forever. It's not about controlling the outcome. It's about being present, being real, being yourself. And if you can do that, if you can show up as a whole person, not as someone who's desperate for validation, then you've already won. Because you're not afraid anymore. Not of losing them. Not of being alone. Not of who you are. You're just here. Fully. Completely. And that's enough. So stop being afraid of losing them. Start being afraid of losing yourself. Because that's the real tragedy. Not when someone walks away, but when you give up who you are to make them stay. Don't do that. You're worth more than that. And the moment you believe that, everything changes. If this hit home, subscribe for more.